My name is Audrey Crawford. I'm 32. Last Thanksgiving. 30 people packed my parents' dining room. The air thick with roasted turkey and expensive vanilla candles. I stood by the sideboard holding a walnut bowl of autumn salad and a bunch of burgundy dahlias I'd spent all summer watering. My mother, Patricia, walked right past my flowers to bury my sister, Vivian, in a loud, dramatic hug. Then came the envelopes. My dad cleared his throat, handing Vivian and her husband, Marcus, a first-class $13,000 Caribbean cruise package. When he called my name, my mother slid a flimsy white sleeve into my palm. Inside was a $10 Starbucks gift card. "You always did prefer the simple things, dear," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. Marcus smirked, and a ripple of chuckles went around the table. I didn't blink. I just gripped the edge of the walnut bowl until my knuckles went white. Then, the scraping of tennis balls on hardwood broke the silence. Grandma Grace stood up from her aluminum walker, her small frame shaking with a rare, cold anger. Before my mother could hurry her off to the back bedroom, Grandma leaned her weight against my shoulder. "Call Thomas Smith." She breathed into my ear, her voice barely a whisper. "Check the old leather purse." Welcome to Her Dignity Stories. If this story is starting to connect with you, please take a second to hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment below letting me know what city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It was 3 days after Thanksgiving when I finally looked at the card. Outside my small apartment window, a cold November rain was drumming against the glass. The room smelled like old coffee and the damp drywall my landlord kept promising to patch. I sat at my drafting table, the $10 plastic card catching the glare of my desk lamp. As a historic preservation architect, I spend my days digging through old blueprints and property logs. I'm used to looking for things people tried to build over. I pulled up the Starbucks website on my laptop to register the balance, mostly just to get it out of my sight. When I entered the serial number to check the digital receipt, the system showed it was purchased through an automated business account. The buyer's billing profile was an old recovery email. My chest tightened slightly. That was the shared inbox my parents, Vivian, and I used before smartphones took over 12 years ago. I hadn't thought about that address in a decade. My mother never deleted anything, but she also never updated her security. I opened a new tab, typed in the old domain, and hesitated over the password box. I tried Vivian's birthday, June 14th, followed by 4 zeros. It was the exact same combination my mother used for the garage keypad, the home alarm, and her old Sears card. The screen flickered, loaded, and then the inbox filled the display. It wasn't a dead account. There were over 400 unread messages, the most recent ones dated from just 2 weeks ago. My eyes jumped down the list of sender names. They weren't promotional spam or newsletter updates. The preview snippets showed formal correspondence from the Mitchell Estate Holdings, Great Western Bank, and a private investment firm in Portland. My grandfather's name, Arthur Mitchell, was listed in the subject lines of an archived thread from 2014. My parents had told me his estate was fully liquidated to pay off his old medical bills before he died. But looking at the screen, I realized the digital trail had never stopped cold. They had just moved the conversation somewhere they thought I'd never look. The smell of Thomas Smith's office hit me the second I walked through the door. It was a mix of old leather binders, worn carpeting, and the sharp, chemical tang of a lukewarm pot of office coffee. Dust motes danced in the thin strips of December sunlight cutting through the heavy window blinds. Stacked on his side table were 3 separate boxes of county deed records, the thick paper yellowing at the edges. Thomas looked at me over his reading glasses, his desk phone humming with a low, persistent static. "Your grandmother's nurse brought this over last month," he said, setting a cracked, vintage Coach coin purse onto the mahogany desk. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He just unzipped it with a slow, deliberate motion and pulled out a single, tri-folded sheet of blue bond paper. It was a certified copy of a declaration of trust from 2012, stamped by a notary in Salem. Your grandfather, Arthur, set this up right after you finished your freshman year of college, Thomas explained, sliding the document toward me. He saw how your father handled his own business accounts. Audrey. He knew that if he left anything directly to Patricia or Gerald, it would be gone before the probate ink dried. I stared at my name typed on the second line. Sole successor beneficiary. For 15 years. My mother had dropped hints at Sunday dinners that I lacked the ambition to handle real family assets. But my grandfather hadn't thought so. He had put $500,000 into a private equity trust, entirely out of my parents' reach. It's not just a cash ledger, Thomas said, tapping his pen on a specific paragraph near the bottom. Look at Article 4. The trust held the legal right of first refusal for the entire 20-acre family orchard property. If anyone tried to transfer or sell that land, the trust had the absolute right to match the offer and take control of the title first. And the notice address listed for all legal tenders regarding the orchard? That's my grandfather's email address. My parents hadn't kept that inbox active out of nostalgia. They had been hiding the orchard's financial alerts right under my nose. The linoleum floor of the county records office was cold, smelling faintly of pine cleaner and wet umbrellas. I stood over a heavy oak table, smoothing down a 3-foot-wide topographical map of our district. Across the room, an old dot matrix printer was screeching as it turned out the latest municipal zoning reports, the paper perforations tearing with a sharp click. My fingers traced the green boundary line marked Family Orchard. Right next to it, highlighted in a bright, neon pink overlay, was a newly approved state utility easement. They passed the green energy infrastructure bill 6 weeks ago. Audrey, Thomas said, setting his coffee mug on a stack of tax assessments. The state had quietly cleared a massive commercial solar grid project right along our western fence line. Our grandfather's 20 acres of old apple trees weren't just agricultural land anymore. They were the primary access bottleneck for a multi-million-dollar utility corridor. The land value hadn't just ticked up, it had skyrocketed tenfold overnight, turning our quiet family sanctuary into a corporate gold mine. My hand began to shake against the edge of the table as I flipped to the pending land grab filings. Marcus wasn't a private equity consultant helping tech startups downtown. The county ledger showed his name listed as the sole statutory agent for 3 shell companies, Apex Land Services, Blue Ridge Partners, and Mitchell Legacy Acquisitions. He was a corporate scavenger. His entire business model was finding rural properties owned by elderly residents, using complicated powers of attorney to lock them into underwater leases, and flipping the land to developers. He didn't stumble into our family through Vivian. He had mapped out our grandmother's zoning coordinates months before he ever bought her that first bouquet of flowers. The smell of rubbing alcohol and white lilies hung heavy in room 214 of the Briarwood Care Center. The only sound was the steady, annoying beep of the vitals monitor by Grandma Grace's bedside. I sat on the plastic visitor's chair, holding her right hand. Her skin felt thin, almost like tissue paper, and her knuckles were cool to the touch. On my lap lay the certified copy of the deed transfer Marcus had filed with the county clerk just 3 weeks ago. According to the date on the notary stamp, this document was executed on October 12th. That was the exact Tuesday Grandma was rushed to the ER after her second stroke, heavily sedated on liquid morphine. She couldn't even remember her own middle name that week, let alone authorize the transfer of a 20-acre asset. I flipped to the signature page, and my throat went dry. The name Grace Mitchell wasn't written in her usual elegant, cursive loop. The lines were broken, jagged, and trailing off the baseline, with a heavy ink smudge where someone had clearly forced her thumb down onto the paper. Then I saw the secondary attachment, a private line of credit disclosure. My father, Gerald, had signed a personal promissory note to Marcus for $180,000 to cover his failed auto shop bills. Marcus hadn't just asked for the land. He had used that debt to back my father into a corner. He'd forced my dad to walk into that hospital room, lift Grandma's limp hand, and guide the pen across the line to clear his own financial mess. It makes me sick to my stomach how some people can prey on their own sick grandmothers just to secure a payday. If you think what my family did to Grandma Grace is absolutely disgusting, please hit the like button right now to show your support. I looked at Grandma's quiet face as she slept, and I tucked the paperwork into my bag. They thought they had buried the trail under hospital gowns and medical jargon, but they forgot that I know how to read the fine print. The 2 weeks my family spent on that Caribbean cruise were the quietest days of my life. My dining table disappeared under stacks of bank disclosures, title history logs, and 5 empty coffee mugs. Every night, the glow of my Excel spreadsheets lit up the dark walls of my room. I didn't call Vivian. I didn't leave angry voicemails for my father. When you spend your life analyzing old buildings, you learn that shouting at a cracked foundation doesn't fix it. You just trace the fracture. Instead, I paid $1,200 out of my savings to hire Arthur Pendleton, a retired forensic document examiner who spent 20 years working with the state police. He spent 3 days analyzing the hospital signature and compared it to Grandma's old utility checks. His certified report concluded that the ink pressure on the deed transfer was physically impossible for a solo signer. With that file in my hands, I quietly walked into the county municipal building and filed an emergency elder financial abuse claim with Adult Protective Services. The caseworker assigned to our file didn't blink. She just took the papers and stamped them with an official case number. Then, I met with Thomas Smith to finalize my grandfather's trust documents. I officially signed the acceptance form to assume full control of the $500,000 Mitchell Equity Fund. With those liquid assets now backing my signature, I didn't stop at saving the orchard. I contacted Great Western Bank, the local institution holding my dad's $180,000 promissory note to Marcus. Because the loan was heavily delinquent and secured by a contested hospital asset, the bank was desperate to offload it. I used the trust capital to buy out my father's debt from the bank. Marcus didn't get a notification. My parents had no idea. But on paper, I was no longer just the daughter they dismissed with a $10 card. I was officially my father's primary lender, holding the legal authority to foreclose on his assets if he stepped out of line. If you discovered your own family was secretly exploiting your grandparents' estate while they were vulnerable, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you pull the legal trigger to expose them? Tell me in the comments right now, because I really want to know your thoughts. My phone finally buzzed on day 7 of their cruise. The static on the line was brutal, mixed with the distant roar of ocean wind and the faint, tinny thumping of a salsa band playing somewhere on the cruise deck. I sat at my kitchen table, a half-eaten turkey sandwich on a paper plate beside my laptop. On the counter, my phone screen kept waking up, casting a cold blue light across the dark room. By 8:00 p.m., the log showed exactly 79 missed calls from my mother, my father, and Vivian. When the screen lit up for the 80th time, I slid the bar to answer and just held the receiver to my ear without saying a word. Audrey, thank goodness you finally picked up. Sweetie. My mother's voice came through, artificially high and breathless, trying to outshout the ship's wind. She didn't sound like the woman who had laughed at my $10 card a week ago. She sounded small, panicked, and desperate. Audrey, we have a bit of a situation here at the ship's guest services desk. Your father's card and Marcus's corporate account just got declined for the port excursions, she stammered, her voice dropping into that fake, sugary register she used when she wanted a favor. The concierge said there's some issue back home with Great Western Bank. Something about a debt transfer on the $180,000 note. We can't get any signal out here to reach the manager. and we need you to wire $500 to the purser's desk right away so we can disembark in Cozumel tomorrow. Marcus will square it with you the second we get back. I promise. I took a slow sip of my ice water, watching the rain grease the glass of my window. I don't have $500 to spare right now. Mom, I said, my voice completely flat. Ask Marcus. Audrey, please don't be difficult. This is your father's vacation, she snapped, the sugar instantly evaporating from her tone. Then she lowered her voice, leaning away from the wind. Marcus checked the local real estate briefs on the ship's Wi-Fi earlier. The Oregon Land Gazette just ran a notice saying an injunction was filed by the Mitchell Equity Trust to freeze any movement on Family Orchard. He says your name is listed on the new statutory filing as the fund manager. Why didn't you tell us you took over my father's old backup account? Look, we know you're just doing this to help the family keep the record straight while we're away, but you need to release that lock so Marcus can finish the zoning transfer with the energy developers. I leaned back in my chair, the plastic frame creaking in the quiet apartment. They still thought I was just the unpaid staff, minding the house while they spent the money. I'm not releasing anything, Mom, I said. Enjoy the rest of your cruise. I pressed the red button, cutting her off mid-sentence, and turned the phone face down into the dark. The heavy gravel crunched under the tires of Marcus's brand new Lexus SUV as it pulled up to the rusted iron gates of Family Orchard. The sky was a dull, bruised gray, and a sharp December wind was rattling the dead leaves in the old Macintosh apple trees. My mother, Patricia, stepped out of the passenger side first, her white cruise sandals looking completely ridiculous against the damp, frozen mud. Marcus followed, tucking a heavy leather portfolio under his arm and smoothing his windbreaker with a confident, salesman smirk. My father and Vivian climbed out of the back, Vivian already holding a fanned-out stack of contract pages from the energy developers. They were so focused on their paperwork, so sure they were about to close a multi-million-dollar zoning deal, that they didn't notice me sitting on the wooden bench by the old tool shed until they were 10 feet away. Audrey, what are you doing here? My mother asked, her tone instantly hardening as she adjusted her sunglasses. We told you we were meeting the corporate representatives here at 2 o'clock to finalize the land transfer. I know, I said, setting my travel mug of black coffee down on the bench. That's why I invited a few other people to join the meeting. As if on cue, the screen door of our grandfather's old cedar cabin creaked open behind me. Thomas Smith stepped out onto the porch, followed by 2 men in neon safety vests carrying electronic transit levels, the county survey team. Behind them came Carolyn Vance, the senior geodetic officer for the County Planning Commission, holding a clipboard stamped with the official municipal seal. Marcus's smirk didn't just fade, his jaw visibly shifted as he looked past the cabin toward the main road. Parked along the shoulder were 4 more cars. Old Mr. Higgins from the dairy farm next door, Mrs. Gable from the parish council, and 5 other longtime neighbors were standing by the fence line, wrapped in wool coats, watching us in total silence. I had spent 3 days making phone calls from my kitchen table, ensuring that if my family was going to carve up Grandma's sanctuary, they would do it under the midday sun, in front of the exact community they spent decades performing for. Marcus didn't move, his fingers digging into the edge of his leather portfolio until the stitching groaned. My mother, Patricia, instantly dropped her chin, her face twisting into that practiced, theatrical sorrow as she reached out her arms toward me. Audrey, please, let's not do this out here in the cold, she cooed, stepping forward to try and wrap me in a fake, maternal hug to quiet the neighbors. Thomas Smith didn't give her the chance. He unbuttoned his wool overcoat, stepped between us, and slammed a 2-inch thick manila folder flat onto the damp stone table. The loud smack of paper against stone made my father flinch. Thomas cleared his throat, looking directly at Marcus and the county officer. The transfer has been voided, he said, his voice entirely unhurried but carrying across the yard. He pulled out the emergency injunction from Adult Protective Services and the State Land Registry. Legal control of Family Orchard was officially returned to Grandma Grace, with me named as her sole legal guardian and successor trustee. "This is a joke," Marcus barked, his face flushing a dangerous, dark red as he tapped his knuckles against his briefcase. "We have a notarized deed." I stood up from the bench, 30 years of being the quiet, invisible daughter finally settling into my jaw. I didn't yell. I just pulled out Arthur Pendleton's forensic handwriting analysis and Grandma's ER admission charts from October 12th. "The county prosecutor is already reviewing the notary fraud on that hospital signature." "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the wind. My father looked at the medical logs, his knees trembling so badly he had to lean against the Lexus bumper. Then I laid down the final document, the official title transfer on his $180,000 promissory note. "I bought your debt from Great Western Bank. Dad," I said, "you're currently 90 days delinquent, which means I hold the legal right to foreclose on your suburban house by Friday morning if anyone disputes this injunction." Imagine the absolute shock of realizing the daughter you tried to bankrupt with a $10 card now holds the keys to your own front door. If you feel the raw power of this moment, drop the word justice in the comments right now. My mother stared at the mortgage title, all the color draining from her cheeks until she looked like chalk. Marcus started shouting, his expensive leather portfolio slipping from his hand and spilling papers across the damp, rotting apple leaves on the ground. My mother's knees gave out, her white cruise sandals sinking straight into the mud as she sat down hard, clutching her pearls. Through the crisp December air, the low, steady rumble of a county cruiser's siren echoed from the main road. 2 investigators from the State Commercial Fraud Division walked through the iron gates, their boots clicking against the gravel as they approached Marcus to serve a formal subpoena. The State Land Registry had officially expanded its investigation into every single property deal Marcus had closed over the last 3 years, freezing his corporate bank accounts and suspending his real estate broker's license on the spot. "This isn't on me," Marcus suddenly yelled, his voice cracking as he spun around to point a shaking finger directly at my father. "Gerald is the one who brought me the hospital deed. He told me the old lady was ready to sign." He grabbed his phone, frantically scrolling through his text history and thrusting the screen right in front of the county officer's clipboard. The text thread showed 3 separate messages from my father, dated from the week Grandma was admitted, asking Marcus how soon the cash would clear once the thumbprint was on the page. Vivian took a step back, her hands dropping to her sides as she watched her husband and her father tear each other apart to save their own skins. The entire performative architecture of the Crawford family collapsed right there in the dirt. 3 weeks later, I sat in a booth at the Blue Star Diner on Route 9, the smell of burnt grease and cheap floor wax filling the air. Outside, a freezing December rain was turning into sleet, streaking the grime on the windows. Vivian sat across from me, a half-empty mug of lukewarm black coffee between her hands. The designer outfits and the perfect hair were gone. Her face looked raw, and her mascara was smudged into dark gray tracks down her cheeks from real, unscripted tears. She had filed for divorce the day after the registry freeze, right after finding Marcus's secondary bank disclosures. He hadn't just leveraged our father. He had been funneling the offshore kickbacks into a townhouse in Portland under his assistant Diana's name. "I was so blind. Audrey," she whispered, her voice cracking as she watched the jukebox lights flicker in the corner. Then she looked up, her red eyes meeting mine, and asked a question she hadn't managed in 33 years. "How did you do it? How did you live in that house with them knowing they never looked at you?" I didn't give her a comforting speech. I just watched a drop of rain slide down the window pane. "You stop expecting them to change, Viv," I said. She reached into her canvas tote bag and set a battered shoebox brand container on the Formica table. I opened the lid, and my breath caught. Inside were my middle school science fair blue ribbons, my high school botanical drawings, and my state architecture preservation certificates. My mother had told me she lost them during the 2012 basement flood, but Vivian had pulled them out of the trash bins before the recycling truck came. She didn't ask for a loan, and she didn't ask for a spot in Grandma's trust. "I don't expect you to forget what happened," she said, wiping her cheek with a paper napkin. "I just want to learn how to be your sister without Mom's script." The spring sun felt warm against the back of my neck as I stood by the new gravel path. The orchard didn't smell like rotting wood or old debts anymore. It smelled like fresh, damp earth, blooming apple blossoms, and the lemon mint rose the local grade school kids had planted last Tuesday. Right at the entrance, bolted to a solid oak post, was a brushed bronze plaque. It read, "Grace Mitchell Community Botanical Garden and Nature Education Center." Grandma Grace passed away quietly in her own bed 14 months ago. Looking out at these very trees, she spent her final year exactly where she belonged, with full-time nurses paid for by the trust her husband built, and her granddaughter protected. Vivian walked up the path, carrying a small cardboard box of clipboards for the afternoon nature class. Before she set them on the registration table, she pulled a small, cream-colored envelope from her pocket and handed it to me. "Mom asked me to give you this," Vivian said quietly, not looking me in the eye. "She tried to mail it to your apartment twice, but it kept getting sent back." I didn't open it. I already knew the handwriting. It was my mother's elegant, looping cursive. The same script she used to catalog my failures for 30 years. Vivian told me they were desperate. The 3-year lease I had granted them on their suburban house, purely to keep my father out of bankruptcy court, was ending in 2 months. The letter was a plea. A classic Patricia Crawford performance filled with words like family blood and regret, asking for permission to move into Grandma's old cabin on the orchard grounds because they couldn't afford the property taxes on their own street. I slid the envelope into my back pocket, right next to my car keys. I didn't call the sheriff to evict them. I didn't write an angry text. I simply instructed Thomas Smith to extend their current housing allowance by another 12 months. But under one strict condition, all legal notices would go through his office. No phone calls, no holiday drop-ins, no access to my life. I didn't do it out of revenge, and I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I finally realized that cutting off toxic people isn't a punishment you inflict on them. It's the price of admission to your own peace. I don't need their apologies to feel whole anymore, because my value was never theirs to define. Look around my yard right now. There are 25 local kids learning how to graft apple trees, neighbors trading seeds, and a legacy that will outlive every lie ever told in that Thanksgiving dining room. To anyone watching this right now who has been cast as the family helper, the reliable one, the one expected to carry the heavy brick while everyone else takes the credit, stop waiting for them to notice your worth. The day you stop being their bank account or their backup plan is the day you finally get to find out who you really are. Don't let them shrink you down to fit into their budgets. If you are ready to stand up, draw that line in the sand and protect your own peace. Take control of your story today. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. If this story reminded you to look at your own family boundaries, please click on the next video appearing on your screen right now. We have an incredible lineup of stories just like this one waiting for you. And make sure you stay subscribed, because in our very next video, I'm going to share a deeply hidden story about an oldest son who discovered what his parents did to his grandmother's safety deposit box while he was deployed overseas. Trust me, you won't want to miss that account. See you in the next one.